At exactly 8:17 p.m., she was still talking like she owned the room, and 5 minutes later, no one would even look at her. For months, she had been quietly gaslighting Mara, twisting small things until Mara started doubting herself, her memory, even her place in her own home. It was subtle, controlled, almost invisible. But that night, everything slipped. She spoke the way she always did, and no one answered. Not Victor, not Nolan, not even once. That silence wasn't awkward. It was the moment her control collapsed, the moment her version of reality stopped working. I'm Linda, and this is the kind of revenge that doesn't need shouting, doesn't need a fight, just one moment where the truth is finally seen and everything changes. Chapter 1. The Line That Should Never Be Said. I saw a pregnant woman sitting in her own driveway, too afraid to walk into her own home, and that was the moment I knew something was not just wrong, it was deliberate. It was late afternoon in Round Rock, just outside Austin, the kind of heat that makes the air feel thick even when the sky is clear. The sunlight hit everything too sharply, bouncing off the hood of a dark gray Lexus parked halfway up the driveway. But I was not paying attention to the car. I was looking at Mara. She was gripping the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles pale, her shoulders shaking in small, uneven movements. Mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, not in neat streaks, but in the messy way that happens when someone has been crying for longer than they meant to. When I tapped on the window, she turned slowly, like she needed a second to place me, and then lowered the glass. I cannot go inside, Rowan. I just cannot. Her voice broke in the middle, like something inside her gave out before the words were finished. One hand dropped from the wheel and rested on her stomach. 7 months pregnant, maybe a little more. The way she held herself told me she had been protecting that space all day. I opened the passenger door and got in. The air inside the car felt stale, like it had been sitting there with her fear. I did not reach for her or say anything right away. People rush to fill silence when they do not know what to do with it. I have learned to let it sit. Her hands were still shaking, not fast, not dramatic, just steady enough to notice, the kind of tremor that comes from something that has been building over time. She said my baby is not his. She said it quietly, almost like she was repeating something she still did not fully believe herself. I did not ask who she meant. I already knew. Clara. Did she say that to you? I asked. Mara shook her head, then hesitated. Not directly. It's never direct. Today she said it in front of Elaine. She laughed a little like she was making a joke and said, "Sometimes babies do not look like who you think they belong to." Then she looked at me. Elaine. That meant this was not going to stay contained. Elaine never meant harm, but she carried stories from one room to another without realizing what she was doing. I leaned back slightly and watched Mara for a second. I could see it in her tone, the way she kept softening what had happened, like she needed it to sound smaller than it felt. This is not the first time, is it? She shook her head again. Thanksgiving, Christmas, the baby shower. It's always small, just comments, just little things, but they don't feel small anymore. Her voice dropped, thinner now. I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just emotional. That landed harder than anything Clara had said. You are not overreacting, I said, and this is not about being emotional. Mara looked at me like she wanted to believe that, but hadn't decided yet. Then what is it? I exhaled slowly. I was not completely sure yet, but I knew enough. This is someone controlling how people see you, little by little. She frowned slightly. Control? Yes, not loud, not obvious, just enough to make people start asking the wrong questions. And me, she asked quietly, what is happening to me? You're starting to doubt yourself, I said. That's how it works. She swallowed, her eyes filling again. And if I'm wrong? If you're wrong, I said, we'll find something real that proves it. But if you're right, then this did not start today. She nodded, slowly this time, like something was settling in place, even if she didn't like it. I stepped out of the car and closed the door. The house stood in front of me, quiet and well kept, the kind of place that looks normal from the outside. My mother was inside. Clara was inside. If someone drove by, they wouldn't see anything unusual. Behind me, Mara stayed where she was. A pregnant woman sitting in the driveway, too afraid to walk into her own family home. That doesn't happen because of one comment. I stood there for a moment, letting my mind run back through what I could remember. Thanksgiving, Clara smiling across the table, saying something about how genetics can surprise you. Everyone laughed. It sounded harmless. Christmas, a joke about those DNA kits people order online, about how families find out things they didn't expect, said lightly like it was just conversation. The baby shower, Clara organizing everything, controlling who spoke to Mara, how she was introduced. She's been through a lot. She's sensitive. We just want everything to be certain. Each moment by itself was easy to ignore. Together, they started to line up. I had seen something like this before, not exactly the same, but close enough. People who do this don't make mistakes out in the open. They build a version of reality slowly, so that by the time anyone questions it, it already feels true. Mara was not just being talked about, she was being reshaped. I looked back at the car. Through the window, I could see her hand still resting over her stomach, like she was holding on to something that might slip away if she let go. Inside the house, Clara was probably moving through everything like nothing had happened, keeping things smooth, keeping things controlled. That was the part that made this different. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not stress. This was someone deciding who Mara was allowed to be and letting everyone else believe it. And it was working. I felt it settle in my chest then. Not anger, not yet, but something clearer than that. Once you see a pattern like this, you can't ignore it. I looked back at the house one more time, then back at the car. This had been going on longer than Mara realized, and I had a feeling Clara was not finished, which meant neither was I. Chapter 2. A pattern too clean to be random. I stayed in the car longer than I needed to, engine off, hands still on the wheel, replaying everything Mara had said. It was not just one moment. That was the part that bothered me. It was too clean, too consistent, like something that had been laid out piece by piece. When I finally walked inside, Clara was already in the kitchen, moving like she always did, calm, precise, in control of every small detail. She looked up and smiled. "Perfect timing," she said. "I was just about to plate everything." "Mara is still outside," I told her. Clara glanced toward the window for half a second, then went back to arranging the plates. "She probably needs a moment. She gets overwhelmed easily these days." I leaned against the counter. "Overwhelmed?" Clara gave a soft laugh. "Pregnancy is a lot. Emotions, stress, hormones. We just have to be patient with her." We, that word again. Dinner moved along like nothing was wrong. My mother talked about her roses, Clara filled the quiet spaces, and Mara never came back in. No one asked why. That was what stuck with me. Not the silence itself, but how natural it felt to everyone else. That night, I started putting things together. Thanksgiving came back first. Clara had been telling a story about a friend who found out something unexpected through one of those home DNA tests. Everyone leaned in, curious, half amused. "You never really know," she had said, smiling. "Families can surprise you." Then she looked straight at Mara, just for a second longer than necessary. At the time, it felt like nothing. Now it felt like the beginning. Christmas was worse. Clara poured wine, laughing about how cheap those DNA kits had gotten. "Honestly," she said, "it is almost irresponsible not to check things now. People deserve certainty." My mother laughed. Someone made a joke. Mara did not. I remember catching the look on her face, tight and confused, like she was trying to decide if she had imagined it. The baby shower was where it stopped being subtle. Clara controlled everything. the guest list, the layout, even the way Mara was introduced to people. "This is Mara," she would say. "She has been through a lot." Another group, same tone. "She is a little sensitive right now, so we are all being careful with her." Each sentence sounded harmless on its own. Together, they painted something else entirely. I saw it land in real time. Denise pulled Mara aside near the gift table, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel private. "You are sure about your due date, right?" Mara blinked. "Of course. Why?" Denise smiled too quickly. "Oh, nothing. I just know sometimes dates get a little off." I was close enough to hear it, close enough to see the shift in Mara's face. That was not a joke. That was doubt, planted and passed along. A few days later, I found something that made it worse. Clara had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she stepped out to take a call. It buzzed once, then again. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was a message thread with Denise. Clara had written, "We just need to make sure Nolan starts asking the right questions." Denise replied, "He already is. You handled that perfectly at the shower." My stomach tightened. By the time Clara walked back in, I had already stepped away, but the words stayed with me. This was not random, it was deliberate. That same afternoon, I went upstairs and found the nursery completely redone. New furniture, different layout, everything finished without a single conversation. Mara stood in the doorway, staring at it like she had walked into someone else's house. "Did you ask for this?" I said. She shook her head slowly. "Clara said I seemed stressed. She said she would take care of it." "You didn't want to." Mara let out a quiet breath. "I didn't even know it was happening." That was the moment it stopped looking like help. That night, Nolan came over. He sat across from Mara at the table, restless, tapping his fingers against the edge like he always did when something was on his mind. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked. Mara nodded. "I'm fine." He hesitated, but I could see it in his face. Something had shifted. He wasn't asking to understand. He was asking because someone had already made him question. Clara didn't need to be in the room anymore. She had already done the work. Victor was no different. I stopped by his office the next day, catching him between meetings. He looked up, distracted but polite. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Do you think Clara has been pushing too much with Mara?" Victor frowned slightly, like the question itself was unnecessary. "Clara just likes things organized. She's trying to help." "Help who?" I said. He didn't answer that. By the end of the week, the rumors had moved beyond the house. A friend mentioned that someone at church had asked if everything was all right with Mara's pregnancy. Not directly, just enough to make it sound like concern. That's how it spread. Quiet, careful, impossible to trace back to a single source. Mara felt it before anyone said it out loud. She started pulling back, short answers, forced smiles, avoiding eye contact, even with Nolan. One morning, she came into the kitchen while I was making coffee. She looked calmer, but it was the kind of calm that comes after someone gives up fighting something they can't name. "I think I should go stay with my mom for a while," she said. "You want to, or you feel like you have to?" She hesitated. "I don't know the difference anymore." I nodded. "Then you should go." Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she had been waiting for permission to say it out loud. "I don't want to make things worse," she said. "You're not the one making this worse." She held my gaze for a second, then nodded. When Clara heard, she reacted exactly like she always did. Calm, understanding, untouchable. "Poor Mara," she said softly. "She just needs space to figure things out." I watched her, really watched her this time. "Or maybe she needed to feel safe," I said. Clara met my eyes, steady, unreadable. Of course, that too. No defensiveness, no hesitation. That was when it clicked fully. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was waiting, because whatever came next, she had already planned it. And now Mara was gone, exactly where Clara needed her to be. Out of the house, out of the conversation, and completely alone. Chapter 3. Numbers don't lie. People do. I stopped trusting what people said and started paying attention to what could be verified. Words were easy to shape. Numbers were not. The baby shower was the first place I looked. Clara had made a point of telling everyone she handled everything herself. That detail stuck with me. So I pulled the invoice Victor had forwarded weeks ago and read it again, slower this time. 2 payments, not one. One under Claire's name, the other under a name I had never heard before, Rachel Monroe. I stared at it longer than I should have. Something about it felt wrong, not just unfamiliar, but out of place, like a piece that had been forced into the picture. I called the venue. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I just need to confirm the payments for that event last May." The woman on the phone did not hesitate. 2 cards, 2 names. Everything processed the same day. No confusion, no mistake. Clara had not done this alone. I found Rachel Monroe within the hour. It was not hard. A few old profiles, a tagged photo from years back, a business listing that looked abandoned. She lived close enough that I could drive there without thinking too much about it. I parked outside her house and sat for a moment, watching the front door. This was either going to confirm everything or lead nowhere. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. The door opened just enough for one eye to look through. "What do you want?" Her voice was sharp, already defensive. "I need to ask you about Clara," I said. The door started to close. I stepped forward. "Please, I think she did something to you too." There was a long pause. Then the door opened wider. 5 minutes, she said. Inside, the place felt quiet in a way that was not peaceful. Rachel stood across from me, arms crossed, like she had already decided this was a mistake. "Talk." "Clara used your name in a payment," I said. "A baby shower. She made it look like you were involved." Rachel did not react right away. Then she let out a slow breath. "Of course she did." "You knew." Rachel shook her head. "Not that, but it fits." She walked to the counter, picked up her phone, and scrolled. When she turned the screen toward me, I saw a thread of messages. Clara's name at the top. "You might want to think about how this looks," one message read. Another followed days later. "I am just trying to help you avoid embarrassment." Rachel lowered the phone. "She never says it directly," Rachel said. "She suggests things, lets other people fill in the blanks." "What happened to you?" Rachel hesitated, then gave a short, hollow laugh. "She turned everyone against me without ever saying one clear lie, made it seem like I was unstable, like I twisted facts. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already done." "What did you lose?" Rachel looked at me for a second, like she was deciding how honest to be. "Everything," she said. "My job, my friends, my reputation. People stopped returning calls. They stopped looking at me the same way." She paused, then added quietly, "The worst part is you start wondering if they are right." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This was not just manipulation. It was systematic. "Do you still have all of this?" I asked. Rachel gave a tired smile. "No one deletes the evidence of how they got ruined." That was the moment it clicked harder than before. This was not the first time. Clara had done this before, and she had gotten away with it. I left Rachel's house with copies of everything and drove straight to Victor's office. He looked up when I walked in, surprised. "Is something wrong?" I closed the door behind me. "Did you ever think Clara might be manipulating people?" Victor frowned, uncomfortable. "That is a strong word." "Answer it." He looked away, then sighed. "There were moments," he admitted, "things that did not quite add up." "What happened when you asked her?" Victor let out a quiet breath. "She made me feel like I was overthinking, like I was imagining problems that were not there." Gaslighting. Victor did not argue. I stepped closer. "It's not just Mara. It's not even new." I told him about Rachel, about the messages, about what she lost. Victor listened, but I could see the hesitation still there. "Even if you're right," he said slowly, "what do you expect to do with that?" I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I ran it back again in my head. Thanksgiving, the first suggestion. Christmas, the seed of doubt. The baby shower, the narrative shift. The messages, the proof. The isolation. It was too consistent, too controlled. This was not a series of moments. It was a method, and methods exist for a reason. Then something else hit me. If she had done this before, and she was doing it now, there was no reason to believe she would stop, which meant this was not just about Mara. It could be about anyone, including me. For the first time, I felt it clearly. I was not outside this. I was just earlier in the process. I looked at Victor again. There's a family dinner next week, right? He nodded slowly time. Yes. Why? Because that's where this breaks, I said. Victor studied me, unsure. What are you planning? I held his gaze. Nothing complicated. He waited. I'm going to let her do what she always does. Victor frowned. And that's enough? I nodded. People like Clara don't stop themselves. They push until no one questions them anymore. I moved toward the door, already thinking through it. The timing, who would be there, what would need to be said and what would not. All I had to do was give her the space she thought she controlled. Then wait. Because if I was right, she would not be able to help herself. And for the first time, I was not completely sure I would be the one in control when it happened.
Chapter 4. The Dinner She Couldn't Control. I picked a night that felt ordinary on purpose, because anything that looked planned would put her on edge, and I needed her exactly the way she liked to be. Comfortable, confident, certain she was the one running everything. I suggested dinner. Nothing formal, just family, the kind of evening Clara always controlled without trying. She agreed right away. Of course she did. When I walked in, everything looked perfect. The table set, the lighting warm, the kind of quiet order she curated so carefully. Clara moved through the room like she always did, steady, composed, like nothing could touch her. You made it, she said, smiling. Would not miss it, I said. Victor sat at the head of the table, quieter than usual. Nolan was already there, but he looked up the second I stepped in. There was something different in his face, not relaxed, not settled. We sat down. Dinner started the way it always did. Small talk, easy conversation, nothing real. No one mentioned Mara. That silence had settled in like it belonged. I let it stretch just long enough. Then I set my fork down. How much did the baby shower cost? Clara glanced up, surprised for a split second, then smiled again. I did not keep track, she said. It was not about money. I nodded. I did. That was enough to shift the room. I reached into my bag and placed the invoice on the table, sliding it toward the center. Paper against wood sounded louder than it should have. Clara did not touch it. Victor leaned forward slightly, reading. What is this? Clara asked, still calm. Just the numbers, I said. Nolan looked between us. Why are we talking about this? Because it does not match what was said. I pulled out the payment records and set them down next to the invoice. 2 payments, 2 names. Clara's expression held, but it was thinner now. You told everyone you handled everything yourself, I said. I did, she replied. Then why is there a second payment under Rachel Monroe? Silence. Not complete, but enough that you could feel it. Nolan frowned. Who is that? Clara let out a quiet breath. A friend who helped cover part of the cost. It was not important. It is, I said, if it was not mentioned. You're making this bigger than it is. No, I said. I am putting it in order. That was the first real crack. Victor kept reading, slower now. I went to see Rachel, I continued. Clara's eyes shifted, just enough for Nolan to catch it. And, he said. I reached into my bag again and placed the printed messages on the table. Clara did not reach for them. Victor did. He read in silence, his face tightening as he moved through each line. Nolan leaned closer. What is that? Victor did not answer. So I did. That's how she works. Clara looked at me, sharper now. You are taking things out of context. I held her gaze. There's no missing context. I picked up one page and read it, steady, no emotion. You might want to think about how this looks. I paused. I'm just trying to help you avoid embarrassment. The words hung there. Nolan looked at Clara. Is that real? Clara turned to him. Of course it is, she said, but it's not what you think. "Then what is it?" Nolan asked. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out right away. That was the second crack. I did not stop. "This is not one situation," I said. "It's a pattern." I laid it out piece by piece. Thanksgiving, the story about testing, Christmas, the idea of certainty, the baby shower, the way Mara was introduced, Rachel, the messages, each moment small, together not small at all. Clara's voice sharpened. "You are twisting everything." I shook my head. "No, I'm just putting it in order." Victor finally spoke. "I've had doubts before," he said quietly. Clara turned to him. "Victor!" He did not look at her. "There were moments that didn't sit right," he continued. "I just chose to ignore them." "Why?" Nolan asked. Victor exhaled. "Because every time I brought it up, I ended up thinking I was the problem." The room went still. Clara pushed her chair back. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You are all overreacting." No one moved. No one agreed. She looked around the table, waiting for someone to step in, to support her, to restore the balance she was used to. No one did. That's when something in her finally broke through. "You think she belongs here?" she said, suddenly, her voice rising. "You think she fits into this family?" There it was. Not careful, not controlled, real. Nolan stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Clara shook her head, frustrated now. "I'm the only one who sees clearly, the only one trying to protect this family from mistakes." I leaned forward slightly. "You did not protect anything." She looked at me. "You controlled it." The words landed harder than anything else. For a second, no one spoke. Victor looked down. Nolan leaned back, stunned. Clara stood there, breathing uneven, realizing too late what she had just shown them. Then she grabbed her phone. "I'm not doing this," she said, and walked out of the room. No one followed. The sound of the hallway door closing felt final. We stayed at the table, none of us moving right away. Nolan rubbed his face. "I didn't see it," he said quietly. Victor did not answer. I gathered the papers slowly, stacking them back together. Everything was there now, not opinions, not guesses, just facts lined up where no one could ignore them anymore. Clara had built everything carefully, making sure no single moment could stand on its own, but she never expected all of it to be seen together. That was where she lost. I stood up, holding the papers in one hand. As I walked toward the door, I felt it settle in. The shift was complete. She no longer controlled the story. But something about the way she left, the look in her eyes before she turned away, stayed with me. It was not defeat, it was calculation, and for the first time that night, I understood something I hadn't fully considered before. This was not over.
Chapter 5. Silence is the loudest verdict. The house didn't go back to normal after that night. It just stopped pretending. No one said it out loud, but something had shifted. You could feel it in the way people moved through the rooms, in the pauses between conversations, in the way certain names weren't mentioned anymore unless they had to be. Clara didn't come back the next day, or the day after. At first, people acted like that meant nothing. Victor kept his routine, Nolan stayed busy, my mother filled the quiet with small talk that didn't go anywhere. But absence has a way of making things louder. By the third day, it wasn't just that Clara was gone, it was that no one was asking when she'd be back. That was new. By the end of the week, the consequences started to settle in, quietly. Victor stopped reaching out to her. At first, it looked like timing issues, missed calls, rescheduled meetings, but then the pattern became obvious. He wasn't making space for her anymore. Nolan didn't mention her either. That part mattered more than anything. He didn't defend her, didn't justify what happened. He just stepped back. And in this kind of circle, that's enough. People notice distance. They don't need explanations. They fill in the blanks on their own. One of Clara's clients quietly pulled out of a deal. No confrontation, no drama, just a short email about changing priorities. Another stopped responding altogether. It spread the way these things always do, not through loud accusations, but through hesitation, through doubt, through that subtle shift in how someone's name lands in a room. Clara had built her influence on controlling perception. Now she had lost control of it, and no one was stepping in to fix it for her. A week later, she finally came back. No warning. She walked in like she still belonged there. I was in the kitchen when I heard her voice. Same tone, same confidence, like nothing had changed. For a second, it almost worked. Old habits are strong. Victor was in the living room. Nolan was nearby. My mother sat at the table. Clara started talking about something small, a scheduling issue, a minor detail, the kind of thing she used to use to pull attention back to herself. And then something strange happened. No one responded. Victor didn't look up right away. Nolan didn't step in. My mother stayed still. Clara paused, just for a second. Then she tried again, a little sharper. Still nothing. Victor finally glanced at her, but it wasn't the same look he used to give her. There was no automatic agreement, no subtle alignment, just acknowledgement. Flat, neutral, like she was anyone else. Nolan gave a short response, polite but distant, no follow-up. The conversation didn't recover. It just died. And for the first time, Clara didn't know how to restart it. She stood there for a moment, holding the space like she always had, waiting for it to bend around her. It didn't. She wasn't leading the room anymore. She was just in it. I watched her face, not for anger, but for recognition. That slow realization that something fundamental had changed. She said a few more things after that, smaller, less certain. None of it landed. Eventually, she stopped trying. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, but final. Mara came back the same week. She didn't hesitate this time. She walked in like someone who understood exactly where she stood. Nolan saw her first. "I'm sorry," he said. No long explanation, no excuses. "I should have trusted you." Mara looked at him for a second, like she was deciding whether it was enough. Then she nodded. "I know." That was enough. Victor came out a little later, slower. "I'm sorry too," he said. His voice wasn't as steady as Nolan's. Mara gave him the same response. No anger, no need to drag it out, just acknowledgement. And somehow, that felt more complete than anything else could have. I stayed out of it. There was nothing left to prove. A few days later, Mara and I sat outside as the sun started to drop. Everything felt quieter now. Not tense, just clear. "When did you realize?" she asked. I thought about it. "When you stopped feeling like yourself in your own space." She looked down for a second, then back at me. "I thought something was wrong with me." That's how it works. It's not obvious while it's happening. She let out a breath, like she was finally letting something go. "You didn't fight her," she said. "No," I said. "I just made it visible." That's all it takes sometimes. You can't argue your way out of something like that. You can't explain it well enough while it's still hidden. But once people see it, really see it, it loses its grip. We sat there a while longer without saying much. Inside, the house felt different. Not perfect, but honest. Clara was still around after that, but not in the same way. People listened to her differently, watched her differently, or sometimes didn't watch her at all. She tried, at first, to pull things back into place, but once a pattern is exposed, it doesn't just disappear because someone wants it to. She had lost something she couldn't rebuild. Not power, control. And without that, everything else started to fall apart on its own. I didn't feel victorious. That's not what this was. No one clapped. No one said anything about justice. It was quieter than that. But it mattered. Because if you've ever been in that position, where someone slowly makes you question your own reality, you know how hard it is to even explain it. It doesn't look like anything from the outside. Until it does. And when it finally becomes clear, when everything lines up and you can see it for what it is, you don't need to fight anymore. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to let it be seen. So, I'll ask you this. Have you ever had someone make you doubt yourself like that? So subtly you didn't even realize it was happening until you were already deep in it? Because once you've seen it once, you don't miss it again. And the next time, you won't stay quiet. You'll recognize it. And that changes everything. Because the truth doesn't need to win. It just needs to be seen. If this story meant something to you, stay with me, share your thoughts below, and follow along for more stories that might feel a little closer to your own.